Welcome, everybody. Today, I want to talk to you about 1099s. This is the time of the year that 1099s are due. And you may not know it, but there is a firm deadline on 1099s. They are due to be sent out by January 31st. And if you don't send them out and you were required to, you actually start incurring penalties and daily interest for every day that you are late. So, this is a timely episode, and I want to help by giving you a roadmap of what the rules are so you can know if you are required to be sending out 1099s. So, generally speaking, if you paid anyone over $600 in the course of your business who is not an employee, so you don't run payroll and give them a W-2, if you paid someone for business purposes, then over $600 over the course of the previous year, then you do owe them a 1099. You have to issue that to them. One copy goes to them and one copy goes to the IRS. This is very important. And a lot of us who are working for ourselves, we pay a lot of contractors for a lot of stuff. But there are a lot of exceptions to when you need to issue 1099s. So let's go over the basic rules. First and foremost, I want to start at the high level. I always like to give a little bit of the background to help orient you to kind of what the whole picture is here and then how you might fit into it. So here's what the trend is. The IRS places a lot of scrutiny on this area because unreported cash income is one of the biggest reasons for the tax gap in this country. The tax gap is the difference between the amount that US citizens actually owe, or sorry, I should say US taxpayers actually owe, and the amount the IRS actually collects. Okay. So the IRS is very reasonably committed to closing the tax gap. So here's what the trend is. The IRS is requiring more reporting. More people and more companies have to issue 1099s than used to. And the penalties are increasing for failure to report. Okay. So the fines for failing to file timely 1099s are growing every tax year. Beware. Do not rely on a memory of not having had to do this. You know, it's possible that 5-10 years ago, you paid contractors all the time and you just didn't bother issuing 1099s. Do not rely on the fact that you managed to get away with that at that time to keep you safe now. It will not. Sorry to say. So you are going to be incurring penalties that will start February 1st, the year you don't issue 1099s you were supposed to. Okay, here's a change that happened in 2020. There have always been multiple types of 1099s. 1099 MISC is the one that you're probably familiar with because that's the one that non-employees or contractors have had their income reported on up until, I think about a year ago, 2 years ago. But there are also lots of other kinds, and there was a recent change. So there's also 1099Ks, 1099 INTs, et cetera, et cetera. There's actually tons of types of 1099s. But for our purposes, we're going to be talking today about 1099 NECs and 1099Ks. So 1099 NEC stands for non-employee compensation. This is meant to clarify that this is for people who are not your employee, right? What does an employee get as a reporting statement? They get a W-2. This is very cut and dried. If you get a W-2, you're an employee. If you get a 1099 NEC, you are not an employee. And now the name really clarifies that. So in tax year 2022, businesses were now required to report payment for products or services of $600 or more to non-employees on the 1099 NEC. So you'll report amounts you paid to independent contractors or attorneys for services provided on line 1 of the 1099 NEC. Whereas in the past, before 2020, you did this on a form called the 1099 MISC, and it happened to be on line 7. Okay, so here's the basic rules of issuing a 1099 NEC. Now, I'm just going to call them 1099s, except where I'm clarifying between types. But just understand that when I'm saying 1099s here, I'm going to be assume that I am talking about 1099 NECs. All right, you need to file a 1099 NEC for any contractor you paid over $600 in the calendar year. One copy goes to the IRS, one copy goes to the contractor. You must file them by January 31st or the next day if that falls on a weekend. You accrue penalties and daily interest for every day you are late past January 31st. Does that stop? No, it doesn't. So you just have to do it. But you don't need to issue a 1099 to a couple different types of people in a couple of situations. So what are those? One, you paid by credit or debit card. Now, why is that? That is because credit and debit cards are third parties, and those are now responsible as a third party payment processor. They are actually responsible for reporting the payments themselves. Okay. And the form is a little bit different. It's called a 1099K. So third party payment processors have to report those transactions on a 1099K. It would mess you up if you paid a contractor by credit card, right? Say I paid my podcast editor by credit card, right? And then I issued her a 1099K to report the amount that I paid her for the year. And then the credit card company also issued a 1099. This would be a 1099K to her to report the amount that I paid her. Well, now she's getting that same income reported twice. And she didn't make it twice. She only made it once. So it's really important that a person only gets one 1099 where they're supposed to. Okay. So here's the second exception. If you paid via PayPal Business, not friends and family, or Venmo, the business setting, not friends and family, or Cash App Business, not friends and family, or Etsy or a similar third-party payment processor, then you don't need to issue a 1099. Same reason as the credit card, because those are considered third-party payment processors. Now, it's really important to note that there are some little wiggly areas where those third parties are not subject to third-party payment processor rules. Zelle, for example, is not actually considered a third-party payment processor. I forget what it's called. It's something else. But if you pay someone through Zelle, you actually do owe them a 1099. I know, it gets complicated. Okay, third exception, if that person is an S corporation or a C corporation, regardless of how you paid them, you do not need to issue them a 1099. This is a source of strife for me every single year because Sunlight Tax is an S corporation, and I do a lot of speaking in a lot of places try to send me 1099s, even though I give them a W-9 that says I am an S corp. You are not supposed to give me a 1099. Of course, the W-9 doesn't actually explicitly say you aren't supposed to do this, and so a lot of those places do it anyway. And then I have to include a note on my tax return explaining why I am not, or why I have already reported that income, and it's a real pain in the butt for me. So I hope you don't cause anyone pain by sending them a 1099 if they're an S Corp or a C Corp. We're going to get to how you will find out that information. Okay, you do need to issue a 1099 to an attorney you pay for services rendered to you, to your business, but not personal, right? So if you're, I don't know, suing your neighbor, right? That's personal. So you don't need to issue the attorney a 1099. But if you hire an attorney for your business, and that's kind of, for me at least, that's the only place that I hire attorneys, you do have to issue them a 1099. This is kind of funny, y'all. I mean, I'm not trying to say anything bad about lawyers, but there is a very genuine distrust of lawyers up at the IRS. They actually have special rules for lawyers, and here they are. So when we're talking about attorneys, you do need to issue a 1099 to an attorney when you pay them by cash or check or Venmo or Zelle. You don't need to issue them a 1099 when you pay them by debit card or credit card, interestingly. The attorney's corporate structure actually has no effect here, right? So if your attorney is an S Corp or a C Corp, doesn't matter. You still have to pay them a 1099, issue them a 1099. I have a little detail here about payments to attorneys. Gross proceeds paid to attorneys or law firms connected with a legal settlement are reported on Form 1099 MISC, Box 10, but payments of an attorney or law firm for services provided to you, so not a legal settlement, but services provided to you, those are reported on the Form 1099 NEC. All right, let's talk about ACH transfers. Okay. An ACH transfer is generally like paying with cash or check. So it means you do need to issue a 1099 MISC to someone you paid this way. Sorry, a 1099 NEC. I misspoke. But if you use the ACH function through a third-party payment processor, so not straight from your bank, like, for example, the ACH function through PayPal, that will be included in PayPal's 1099K reporting. And so you don't need to issue them, in that case, a 1099 NEC. Okay, now there is a rule that you have probably heard about in the news, and I want to kind of clarify what's going on with it. So there is a new 1099K reporting threshold that was supposed to be put into effect in 2022. So that would affect the taxes you're working on now. But third-party payment processors made a big stink, and they got the rule pushed out to tax year 2023. So at the moment, this rule that you may have heard about is actually not yet in effect. It's on the back burner for 2023. So, but here's what the rule is, just in case you've heard this, so that you know where you stand. So pre-2023, third-party payment processors only had to report income or send out 1099Ks if somebody had over 210 transactions or made over $20,000 in revenue. But there's a weirdness there. 1099 NECs have to be reported for income over $600, right? Not 20,000, 600. And 1099Ks only used to have to be issued for over $20,000. Well, Congress is trying to make that simpler. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 synced up these two rules so they would be the same. This is actually great, right? It's going to cause a lot less confusion. It's not like you weren't supposed to report that income if you didn't get the 1099. You've always been obligated to report that income. So this just makes the reporting simpler and more similar across the board. It's easier to understand. Okay. So under this new rule, 1099Ks need to be issued to anyone who sold products or services and made over $600 rather than $20,000. Note that this is only true for business transactions, okay? So personal payments like reimbursing your friends for takeout do not count. But as self-employed people, this means that we're affected, right? This change was meant to go in effect in 2022 and thus change the reporting requirements for your 1099Ks that you're getting right now. But like I said, these third-party payment processors fought the change. And so the IRS has decided to delay it for one more year. In other words, you are not owed a 1099K if you sold stuff through Stripe or Etsy, for example, until you've crossed that threshold of either 200 transactions or $20,000. Next year, we think, if it's not delayed again, you'll get a 1099K if you earned over $600. Okay, a much lower threshold. Now, interestingly enough, there are some states that did implement this change. Okay, so I'm just going to name these states. All of them use that lower threshold of $600. These are the states: Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Virginia. I do not actually know the answer about how this is going to change the reporting. If you happen to live in one of those states, stay tuned. This is an open question to me. Okay, so here's some tips on filing your 1099s, okay? 1099 NECs specifically are the ones you are going to be filing for your contractors. So as a best practice, before you ever pay someone, you want to have that person fill out a W-9. And this is really easy. You just grab the link to a blank W-9 form off the IRS website. Okay. Easy peasy. This W-9 does not get sent to the IRS. This is for your records. Okay. So you want to save it somewhere secure. It does have identifiable info on it, like their social security number potentially. So it's very, very important. Even though you can easily email a blank W-9 to your contractor, you do not want them emailing you back the W-9 because that's not secure. That you don't want to email social security numbers. So you should have them drop it in an envelope with a stamp on it, send it to you snail mail, or you can use something secure like a Dropbox, for example. Okay. There is a checkbox on this form, the W-9, to show whether this person is a C Corp or an S Corp. And this way, you know the answer to that question, right? So if somebody asks for a W-9 from me, for example, through Sunlight Tax, I'm going to be checking the box on that says Sunlight Tax is an S Corp. In other words, if you know the rules, you know, once you get that W-9, you don't need to send me a 1099 for an amount that you paid me, which is great. And the W-9, the whole awesomeness of it is you have that in your record. So if the IRS ever audits you and says, hey, you didn't issue the 1099s you were supposed to be, you haven't been reporting income, you pull out that W-9 that I sent you that says, no, I did. Here's the proof that I didn't need to issue that. Okay. So that W-9 is protective for you. You want to make it a habit to ask for a W-9 from anybody you pay throughout the year. In fact, you should ask for that and you should not pay them until they fill out the W-9. That is your point of leverage. And that's why if you've ever worked for a large institution, a nonprofit, a university, you know that if you go do some work for a large organization, they're not paying you shit until you fill out a W-9. We'll take a page from that playbook because that's actually what you're supposed to do. Okay. So I recommend you do that too. Okay. So the W-9 gives you all the info that you need to file your 1099s. Namely, it gives you the person's legal name, their mailing address, their social security number, or their EIN. It has a residency question for tax withholding purposes. Okay. So if you get a W-9 from somebody, if they fall off the face of the planet, you can still do your legal due diligence and you can do your required reporting to the IRS and you have the info that you need. This is really important because frankly, the scenario I see all the time is that you pay somebody for work early in the year, January, February, and then it comes around to next tax season. It's a year later, you've been out of touch with this person and you can't find them. So you may have every intention of doing everything that you should of issuing this 1099, but you simply cannot find that person again. You can't get the info. That's why you want to get the W-9 up front. Okay. So, all right, next, here's some next steps for you. I want you to do your bookkeeping for 2022. This is really important in January. And what you're going to do is you're going to run a report, or if you're doing it manually, like on a spreadsheet, you're going to make a list of all the payments you made to contractors and attorneys. Okay. So we're not talking about every single individual payment. You're making a total for the various people. Okay. So Mary, Shaniqua, Bob, you're like listing out the various people that you paid. Okay. You're going to see which one you paid over $600, right? So the ones who you didn't pay over that threshold, you can just cross them off. You don't need to send them 1099s. But the ones that you did pay over 600, now you're going to whittle down that list by the criteria above. Okay. Did I pay them by credit card? Was it definitely for my business and not personal? Are they an S Corp? Are they a C Corp? Right? So you're going to whittle them down and a couple of them are going to come off your list as you answer those questions. Okay. This is going to get you the list of people to whom you actually owe 1099s. And your report should tell you the totals of what you paid them. Right? So you need to be doing bookkeeping through the year. I think if you've listened to me talk, you know that this is true. You need to be doing bookkeeping through the year no matter what. So you have tracked the amounts you paid them, and that's what you're going to report on the 1099. It's not a terrible idea to give them a heads up that you're doing this so that they know, so that they are aware. And I'm just, for the purposes of this podcast, going to assume that everybody is doing right by the law and reporting their income as the law requires. But you don't want to have the number be off, right? Say your calculations said you paid them $783 and they added the numbers a little bit differently and they came out to, $789. You don't want a discrepancy. It's just a lot easier and better if the numbers match. Okay. If the numbers don't match, somebody might be missing one of the payments, right? Okay. So if you didn't get a W-9 from your contractors before you paid them, which I hope you will change your habit and make that your habit ongoing starting now. But if you didn't, and a lot of us learn the hard way, you'll need to get one now. Okay. So just remember that this form has all the info you need, but you need to keep it secure. So use postal mail or Dropbox or another secure method of receiving that information, not email. Okay. So let's summarize. So the rules have been shifting in recent years. I know that this can feel really confusing. And if you're new to hiring people or paying people in your business, it can feel kind of hard to get on board 1099s. But remember, they're due out by January 31st. If you don't issue them by January 31st, you are just going to have a clock going where you get charged daily interest until you do. So this is the thing you do need to take care of. That interest is not going to get stopped until you issue the 1099s if you're supposed to. So the best thing you can do is to know the rules. And because you've listened to this podcast, now you know them. So I hope I've helped you there. Now, if you want more explicit how-to instructions and a safe space to ask your questions, I am going to be offering a live workshop about 1099s. It's coming up quickly on Tuesday, January 24th. I'm going to be teaching the rules and giving you an explicit walkthrough of how to issue your 1099s and giving you an action checklist to get it done quickly and without mistakes, which is very important because making mistakes, oh man, it causes the biggest pain in the ass. So you want to get this done before the deadline. I'm going to give you an action checklist to get it done quickly, without mistakes, and on time. I'm also leaving a generous amount of Q&A time so that you can come to this workshop and get your questions answered. I want you to know that I'm also bringing in my incredibly awesome tax advisor, Orion, who's another tax expert who works here at Sunlight Tax, to help me answer questions so that we have sort of double firepower and can really get through all of the questions. So it's going to be a safe space. We're going to go through, about 45 minutes to an hour of teaching, and then the rest is all questions. So you're going to get your question answered. You'll get the recording, you'll get the checklist if you can't make the time live. The class is $97. You don't need to be a part of any other program to do it. I'm trying out doing some one-off classes. So you can sign up at courses.sunlighttax.com/1099. That's 1099. So that's courses.sunlighttax.com/1099. I also want you to know that if you are in Money Bootcamp, this is already included. You are going to get a link to this class and you get to be there already. But also, if you've been maybe considering Money Bootcamp, maybe thinking about it, you're not sure if you're ready to make that investment. This 1099s class is just a short, immediately relevant, practical class that is a way for you to just come and learn a thing and try out my teaching style, see if you like it, right? And I just want to let you know a special thing I'm doing. I'll be giving everyone in the class a coupon code to join Money Bootcamp for $97 off. In other words, if you pay for this class and then you decide to join Money Bootcamp within the next 30 days, this class will be free. Okay. So it'll sort of retroactively become included. That's only good for 30 days, not good forever. But if you, want a little time to kind of test it out and try it, see if it's right, it's just a way to do that with a little less risk. So I hope that is just kind of a nice to have a thing. There's no pressure. There's not going to be a pitch or anything. Just want you to know that it is kind of a low key way to test out if, my teaching style is going to work for you. Okay. So come get your 1099 squared away before the deadline painlessly, quickly, super easily. You can go to courses.sunlighttax.com/1099. And for all of you, whether or not you come to the course, I hope that this has been really helpful in outlining for you what the rules are up to date as of January 2022, because they are changing and shifting all the time. So I hope this has helped you understand what the rules are, how they apply to you, and what your next steps are. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.